Loyalty in corporate America? Let me tell you, it's about as real as those "we're like family here" speeches at company picnics. I dedicated 8 years of my life to quantum dynamics, debugging their systems, upgrading their infrastructure, basically being the invisible superhero that kept their multi-million-dollar operation running. And how did they repay me? By having me train my own replacement, some fresh-faced kid they could pay half my salary, before kicking me to the curb. But what they didn't know was that I left behind a little parting gift, a ticking time bomb buried deep within their code, set to activate exactly 30 days after my departure. The thing about underestimating your tech team? It's a mistake you only make once. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I still remember the day everything changed like it was yesterday. It was a crisp October morning in Seattle, the kind where the air feels sharp against your skin and the sky stretches endlessly blue above the city skyline. I arrived at Quantum Dynamics Glass and Steel headquarters at 7:30 a.m., just like I had, every weekday for the past 8 years. The security guard, Frank, greeted me with his usual nod and half smile as I swiped my badge and headed to the elevators. "Morning, Jake," he called after me. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I turned and smiled back. "Can't complain, Frank. How's that?" "Grandson of yours doing in college?" Frank beamed with pride. "Made the dean's list again. Kid's gonna go places, I tell you." Little did I know that Frank's grandson would outlast me at the company I had helped build. The elevator doors opened onto the 12th floor, developer operations, my kingdom, more or less. I had started at Quantum Dynamics as a junior developer straight out of college. By 32, I had worked my way up to lead systems architect, overseeing the intricate network of software that powered one of America's fastest-growing financial technology companies. Our platform processed over $2 billion in transactions annually. Without it, the company was just a fancy name and a sleek website. My small team and I had built most of the critical systems from scratch. We had survived 3 major platform upgrades, countless all-nighters during launch periods, and the great server migration of 2021 that the CEO, Marshall Winters, had once called the backbone of our competitive advantage. That was before Marshall decided that backbones were replaceable. I settled into my desk, nestled in the corner office with a view of Puget Sound, a perk of seniority, and began my morning routine, checking the system logs, reviewing overnight, performance metrics, and sipping the strong black coffee from my world's okayest programmer mug that my sister had given me as a joke. 3 minutes into reviewing a particularly interesting authentication log, my phone buzzed. It was a meeting invitation from Diane Roberts, our HR director. Meeting with Marshall and Diane, 9:00 a.m. executive conference room. No agenda, no explanation. Meeting with the CEO and HR on a Monday morning? Anyone who spent more than a year in corporate America knows that's never good news. Still, I wasn't worried. Not really. Our last quarterly review had been stellar. The system uptime was at 99.98%. We'd successfully fended off 2 significant cyber attack attempts, and the new mobile payment gateway I'd designed had increased transaction speeds by 36%. Plus, I had just completed the major overhaul of our security protocols, a 6-month project that had saved the company from potential compliance nightmares. At precisely 9 a.m., I knocked on the frosted glass door of the executive conference room. Marshall's voice boomed from within. "Come in, Jake." Marshall Winters was the stereotypical tech CEO. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair always perfectly styled, designer eyeglasses perched on his nose, and wearing what I'm sure was a suit. That cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He had that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes, and a handshake that was just a little too firm, like he'd read about power moves in some airport business book. Beside him sat Diane, clutching a manila folder like it contained state secrets. She offered a tight-lipped smile that looked more like a grimace. "Have a seat, Jake." Marshall gestured to the chair opposite them. Coffee? Water? I declined both. Something in my gut told me to stay sharp. So, Jake, Marshall began, leaning forward slightly, hands clasped on the polished conference table. You've been with us, 7 years now? 8, I corrected. Going on 9 in February. Right. And we appreciate all you've done for quantum dynamics. Your work has been invaluable. Past tense. My stomach tightened. But as you know, the tech landscape is changing rapidly. We need to stay competitive, agile, adaptable. I nodded slowly, recognizing the corporate speak preamble to bad news. The board and I have been reviewing our operational structure, and we've decided to reorganize the developer operations department. There it was. Reorganize. Another word for we're about to screw you over, but legally. What exactly does reorganize mean, Marshall? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Marshall exchanged a quick glance with Diane before continuing. We're bringing in some new talent with specialized expertise in cloud infrastructure and AI integration. As part of this transition, we'll be redefining certain roles within the company. Diane finally spoke up, her voice carefully modulated to sound sympathetic but firm. What Marshall is saying, Jake, is that we're creating a new position, Chief Technology Strategist, that will oversee all development operations. This person will be bringing in their own team to implement some changes. Changes to the system I built, I stated flatly. The system you've maintained, Marshall corrected, a subtle but significant distinction that diminished my role. Look, Jake, business is evolving. We need fresh perspectives, new approaches. And where do I fit into this reorganization? I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear them say it. Marshall cleared his throat. We value your institutional knowledge tremendously, which is why we'd like you to assist in the transition. You want me to train my replacement, I translated. We prefer to think of it as knowledge transfer, Diane interjected smoothly. Marshall nodded. Exactly. We're bringing in someone, a brilliant guy, Alexander Chen, poached him from Silicon Valley, and we need you to bring him up to speed on our systems, just for the next month or so. And after that? Another uncomfortable glance between them. After that, Diane said, opening the manila folder and sliding a document across the table, we'll be offering you a generous severance package. I looked down at the paper. 6-month salary, health benefits for 3 months, and a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to choke on. You're firing me, I said plainly. We're restructuring, Marshall corrected, his CEO smile never wavering, and offering you a dignified exit with appropriate compensation. I stared at him, this man who had praised my work at the last 3 company-wide meetings, who had personally handed me the Innovation Excellence Award just 4 months ago. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye as he discarded 8 years of my life like it was nothing. Do I have a choice? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Of course, Diane said. You can decline the transition assistance role, in which case... She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Decline, and the severance package would disappear faster than free donuts in the break room. I took a deep breath. When does this Alexander start? Tomorrow, Marshall replied. We'd like you to give him a comprehensive overview of our systems, documentation, security protocols, everything he needs to hit the ground running. Everything I had built, documented, secured, and perfected over 8 years, handed over to a stranger in 30 days. Fine, I said finally. I'll do it. Marshall's relief was palpable. Excellent. I knew we could count on you, Jake. You've always been a team player. Team player. Right. The kind that gets benched permanently. The next morning, I arrived at work to find someone sitting at the desk across from mine. A desk that had been empty since my last junior developer, Melissa, had been promoted to another department. He was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with stylish black-framed glasses and the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having experienced failure. "You must be Jake," he said, standing and extending his hand. "Alex Chen. Great. To meet you." His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. That somehow made it worse. "Welcome to quantum dynamics," I replied mechanically. "Marshall asked me to show you the ropes." "I can't tell you how excited I am to work with you," Alex said, following me to my desk. "I've heard incredible things about the infrastructure you've built here." I felt a twinge of professional pride before remembering that this enthusiastic kid was here to replace me. "Let's start with an overview of the system architecture," I said, pulling up a series of diagrams on my monitor. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. As I began explaining the intricate web of APIs, databases, and security, protocols that made up quantum dynamics' technological backbone, I noticed something unsettling. Alex was good. Really good. He asked intelligent questions, quickly grasped complex concepts, and even suggested improvements to certain processes that, annoyingly, made sense. By lunchtime, he had already mapped most of our core system in his head, something that had taken me months to fully understand when I first started. "Want to grab lunch?" Alex asked cheerfully. "I'd love to pick your brain about the transaction verification system. I noticed there might be a way to reduce the latency by restructuring the authentication sequence." "I brought my lunch," I lied. "But feel free to go ahead. The documentation for the transaction system is in the shared drive folder labeled TVM 2023. After he left, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my screen. This was actually happening. They were replacing me with this wunderkind who would probably have my entire job figured out in a week, not a month. I opened my personal email and half-heartedly started updating my resume. 8 years at one company looked good, but the tech industry moved fast. My skills, while deep, were specialized to quantum dynamics' unique ecosystem. How marketable would I be out there in the wild? I was 32, not ancient by any means, but in tech years, practically middle-aged. As I brooded, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Megan. "How's work? Still saving the corporate world one line of code at a time?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Megan had always been proud of my career, bragging to her friends about her big brother, the computer genius. How could I tell her I was being pushed out? That apparently I wasn't genius enough? I typed back, "Just another Monday. How's the family?" Shifting the conversation felt cowardly, but I couldn't bring myself to share the truth. Not yet. It felt too much like failure. The rest of the day was a blur of technical explanations, system demonstrations, and the growing knot in my stomach, as I watched Alex absorb everything I showed him with frightening efficiency. By 5:30 p.m., most of the office had cleared out, but Alex showed no signs of leaving. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" I asked, not bothering to hide my irritation. Alex looked up from his notebook. Yes, an actual physical notebook where he'd been documenting everything I'd shown him. "Not really. Just trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible. I know this must be awkward for you." So he knew. Of course he knew. "Marshall told you?" Alex nodded, having the decency to look uncomfortable. "He mentioned you'd be transitioning out after the knowledge transfer. For what it's worth, I think it's a mistake. Your understanding of these systems is incredible. Not incredible enough, apparently," I muttered. Alex sighed. "Look, it's not personal. It's business," I finished for him. "Yeah, I've heard that one before." An uncomfortable silence hung between us. "I should get going," I said finally, gathering my things. "My cat needs feeding. I didn't have a cat." "See you tomorrow," Alex called after me as I walked out. That night, in my apartment overlooking the less glamorous part of Seattle, I nursed a whiskey and contemplated my options. The responsible thing would be to professionally transfer everything. I knew to Alex, accept my severance with dignity, and start fresh somewhere new. But as I sat there scrolling through job listings that all seemed to want younger, cheaper developers with experience in technologies I'd never had time to learn. While maintaining Quantum's legacy systems, a different idea began to take shape. What if I didn't make this transition quite so smooth? Nothing obvious, nothing that could be traced back to me or violate my severance agreement. Just a little insurance policy, a reminder of my value. I took another sip of whiskey, opened my laptop, and began to code. A subtle bug, ingeniously hidden within the transaction verification system, Alex's particular area of interest. Something that wouldn't trigger immediately, but would activate precisely 30 days after my departure. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would harm customers or crash the system permanently, just enough to cause significant disruption, confusion, and a very clear message: you shouldn't have let me go. The code was elegant, almost beautiful in its simplicity. It would redirect a small percentage of international transactions through an obsolete verification pathway, one that I had created as a backup years ago but had never documented. The error messages would be cryptic, the logs clean, and the only person who would know how to fix it quickly would be me. As the Seattle rain pattered against my window, I saved the changes to a USB drive. Tomorrow, during the system demonstration, for Alex, I would upload it to the production environment, hidden among legitimate updates. Was it petty? Probably. Unprofessional? Definitely. But after 8 years of loyalty, of missed weekends and canceled vacations, of building something from nothing only to be discarded like yesterday's technology, it felt justified. I closed my laptop, finished my whiskey, and for the first time, since that morning's meeting, I smiled. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they'd remember me long after I'd left the building. I slept better that night than I had any right to. The next morning, I arrived early at the office, determination fueling my steps. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket, like I was carrying a miniature bomb rather than a few lines of code. The office was nearly empty at 6:45 a.m., just the way I needed it to be. I made my way to my desk, booted up my computer, and entered my credentials. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment. Was I really going to do this? Cross this line? But then I remembered Marshall's dismissive correction. The system you've maintained. And my resolve hardened. With practiced efficiency, I implemented my insurance policy into the production environment, disguising it within a routine security update. The code nestled itself deep within the transaction verification system, dormant and undetectable until its trigger date, exactly 30 days after my employee access would be revoked. I covered my tracks meticulously, modifying timestamps and leaving. No trace of the unauthorized update in the logs. By the time Alex arrived at 8:30, I was casually sipping coffee and reviewing documentation as if it were any other Tuesday. "Morning," Alex chirped, setting down a cardboard tray with 2 cups. "I brought coffee. Wasn't sure how you take it, so I got one black and one with cream and sugar." The gesture caught me off guard. It was thoughtful in a way that made my plan suddenly feel petty. I pushed the feeling aside. "Black is fine," I said, accepting the cup despite already having one. "Thanks." Alex settled in at his desk, opening his notebook to a fresh page. "So, what's on the agenda for today? You mentioned we'd dive into the security protocols?" I nodded, subtly closing the terminal window where I'd been erasing evidence of my morning activities. "Right. Let's start with access management and encryption standards." As we worked through the morning, I found myself genuinely engaged in explaining the security infrastructure I'd designed. It was my finest work, a multi-layered system that had successfully repelled numerous attack attempts over the years. Despite everything, professional pride had me presenting the information thoroughly and accurately. This is impressive, Alex said after I'd walked him through the third layer of authentication protocols. Most companies just implement standard frameworks, but you've customized everything to address specific vulnerabilities in the financial sector. When you're processing billions in transactions, the standard isn't good enough, I replied, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. Alex looked thoughtful. Is that why you've maintained separate verification pathways for domestic and international transactions? Regulatory compliance? My heart skipped a beat. He'd already noticed the dual pathways, the very architecture where I'd hidden my bug. Partly, I said carefully. International transactions face different regulatory frameworks and fraud patterns. The separate pathway allows for specialized verification without slowing down domestic processing. He nodded, seeming satisfied with the explanation. Smart design, modular but integrated. Around noon, Marshall appeared at our workspace, his CEO smile dialed to maximum wattage. How's it going, gentlemen? Alex, getting everything you need from Jake? Absolutely, Alex replied enthusiastically. Jake's infrastructure design is remarkable. The security protocols alone are worth studying. Marshall nodded, pleased. Jake's always been thorough. That's why we wanted this knowledge transfer to be comprehensive. He turned to me. Jake, could I see you for a moment? There are some transition details we should discuss. I followed Marshall to a small conference room, where Diane waited with another folder of documents. Jake, she began as soon as the door closed. We've prepared your transition timeline. As discussed, we'd like you to work closely with Alex for the next 4 weeks. After that, you'll have 1 week of administrative wrap-up, and then your official separation date will be the following Friday. She slid the papers toward me, a detailed schedule of what systems and processes I should cover each week, culminating in my departure. My entire professional life reduced to a 5-week exit plan. At the bottom, Marshall added, you'll find the confidentiality and non-compete agreements we need you to sign. Standard procedure. I skimmed the documents, my jaw tightening at the non-compete clause. I couldn't work for any competing financial technology company for 12 months after leaving Quantum Dynamics. This essentially bars me from working in my specialized field for a year, I pointed out. Marshall had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. It's to protect our proprietary systems and client relationships. The severance package should help bridge any employment gap. 6 months severance for 12 months of restricted employment. The math didn't add up. What if I don't sign this? I asked, already knowing the answer. Diane's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing irritation. Then we'd have to reconsider the terms of your separation, including the severance package. In other words, sign or leave with nothing. I signed. The bug in the system suddenly felt less like petty revenge and more like justified self-preservation. When I returned to my desk, Alex was deep in the code base, examining the transaction processing architecture with impressive focus. He glanced up as I sat down. Everything okay? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Just paperwork, I replied flatly. Alex hesitated, then said quietly, Look, I know this is awkward. If it helps at all, I had no idea they were pushing you out when I took this job. They told me it was an expansion position. I studied his face, looking for deception, but found only sincerity. Great. Now I couldn't even properly hate my replacement. It's not your fault, I finally admitted. Corporate decisions rarely consider the human element. The rest of the day passed in a blur of technical explanations, system demonstrations, and the surreal experience of teaching someone how to replace me. By Wednesday afternoon, Alex had already begun suggesting improvements to my code, small efficiency tweaks that annoyingly made sense. If we refactor this authentication sequence, he explained, pointing to a section of code I'd written 3 years earlier, we could potentially reduce processing time by 12 to 15%. It would mean restructuring some of the dependent functions. But the performance gains would be significant. He was right, and it irked me. The changes he proposed were innovative, the kind of fresh perspective that comes from not being buried in maintenance tasks for years. In another timeline, we might have made a good team. As the week progressed, I found myself in a strange emotional tug of war. Professional pride had me teaching Alex thoroughly, answering his questions honestly, showing him the elegant solutions I'd crafted over the years. Yet self-preservation kept me holding back certain key insights, small workflow optimizations, undocumented shortcuts, and crucially, any hint of the dormant bug I'd planted. By Friday, a new complication had emerged. I actually liked Alex. He was smart, hardworking, and surprisingly humble despite his impressive credentials. He brought me coffee every morning, stayed late to absorb as much information as possible, and genuinely valued my expertise. When he asked questions, he listened to the answers with real interest, not just waiting for his turn to speak. Over lunch, which he'd insisted on buying, he shared his background: MIT computer science degree, 4 years at a prestigious tech firm in Silicon Valley, and a genuine passion for financial technology because, as he put it, done right, it can democratize access to financial services for underserved communities. So why leave Silicon Valley for Seattle? I asked between bites of overpriced sandwich. Alex's expression clouded slightly. Let's just say I learned the hard way that even the most progressive-seeming tech companies have their issues. I thought a change of scenery might help. I recognized the look, the same one I'd seen in my own mirror all week. The look of someone who'd been burned. They promised you something they didn't deliver? I guessed. He nodded. 2 years of 80-hour weeks on the promise of leading a new innovation team. Then they brought in some hotshot from Google to head it up instead. So you jumped ship. Applied. To quantum dynamics the next day, he confirmed. Marshall promised me autonomy and a chance to really innovate. He paused, studying my reaction. I'm guessing you've heard similar promises? I couldn't help but laugh. Marshall has a standard playbook. The "we're revolutionizing finance" speech, the autonomy to innovate promise, and the "you're not just an employee, you're a partner" line. Alex winced. Got the full treatment during my interviews. Give it time, I said, surprised by my own bitterness. Eventually, you'll learn that partners are expendable too. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I'm sorry, Alex finally said, about how they're treating you. It's not right. The sincerity in his voice made my stomach twist with guilt. Here I was, planning to sabotage his first months on the job, and he was expressing genuine empathy for my situation. For a brief moment, I considered coming clean, deleting the bug, and just accepting my fate. But then my phone buzzed with an email notification from HR, a reminder to complete my knowledge transfer assessment form, rating how effectively I was training my replacement. They were evaluating me on how thoroughly I dug my own grave. The moment of doubt passed. The bug would stay. The weekend provided a brief respite from the surreal experience of training Alex, but by Monday morning, I was back at my desk, continuing the process of professional harakiri. Week 2 focused on the database architecture and integration points with third-party services, complex systems that had taken me years to optimize. Marshall made occasional appearances, always with that plastered-on smile, checking on Alex's progress and pointedly ignoring the tension his presence created. Each time, Alex would enthusiastically share something new he'd learned, and Marshall would respond with variations of, "Excellent, that's exactly why we brought you on board." By Wednesday of the second week, Alex had already started implementing some of his proposed changes, with my reluctant guidance. I had to admit, his upgrades to the authentication sequence had improved performance exactly as he'd predicted. The system was running more efficiently than ever, which only deepened my mixed feelings about my hidden sabotage. That afternoon, Melissa from product development stopped by my desk. The first colleague who's dated acknowledged the elephant in the room. "Hey, Jake," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure no management was within earshot. "I heard what's happening. It's total bullshit." I shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "Corporate evolution. Adapt or die, right?" "It's not right," she insisted. "After everything you've done for this company, the cash flow crisis last year, you worked 3 days straight to fix that meltdown." "Apparently, institutional memory has a short shelf life," I replied. Melissa lowered her voice further. "A bunch of us are going out for drinks Friday. Sort of a unofficial appreciation thing. For you, you should come." The gesture touched me more than I expected. "Thanks, Melissa. I'll be there." After she left, Alex, who had been pretending not to listen, spoke up. "What was the cash flow crisis?" I hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing this particular war story. About 14 months ago, our third-party payment processor pushed an update that conflicted with our transaction verification system. Suddenly, millions of dollars in transactions were getting stuck in an authentication loop. Customers couldn't access their funds, vendors weren't getting paid, and the error logs were completely useless. "What did you do?" Alex asked, genuinely intrigued. "Didn't leave the office for 3 days, slept under my desk. Eventually tracked down the conflict in a nested dependency that no one had documented. Wrote a bridging protocol that allowed our system to communicate with the updated processor without breaking either end." Alex whistled low. "That's impressive troubleshooting." "Marshall sent an email thanking the dedicated team for resolving the issue," I added, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "I was the only one who worked on it." Alex was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Does that happen often? Critical issues?" "That only you know how to fix, if he only knew what was coming." "More often than management would care to admit," I said truthfully. Friday night found me at the Watershed, a dimly lit bar a few blocks from the office, surrounded by a dozen colleagues who'd shown up for my unofficial farewell. Melissa had organized the whole thing, complete with a cake iced with Quantum's loss in blue frosting. The genuine affection from my colleagues, developers, QA testers, even a few from the marketing team, left me with complicated feelings about my hidden bug. These people weren't responsible for Marshall's decision. They'd be the ones dealing with the chaos when international transactions started failing mysteriously. "Speech!" someone called out, after several rounds of drinks had loosened everyone up. I reluctantly stood, beer in hand. "I'm not great at this kind of thing," I began awkwardly. "But I want to thank you all for coming tonight. The last 8 years have been educational." A few chuckles rippled through the group. "Seriously, though, working with all of you has been the best part of this job. Whatever comes next, I won't forget that." "To Jake," Melissa raised her glass. "The only reason the whole damn system hasn't crashed and burned." "To Jake," the others echoed, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it was almost physical. As the night wound down and people began to leave, Alex, who had hung back most of the evening, recognizing he was an awkward addition to my farewell party, approached me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, sliding onto the bar stool next to mine. Off the record, the 3 beers I'd consumed made me less guarded than usual. "Sure, why not? If you were in my position, coming into a role where someone with your experience was pushed out, what would you do differently? How would you handle it better than I am?" The question caught me off guard. Here was my replacement, the beneficiary of my professional execution, asking for advice on how to do better by the next person in my position. "Document everything," I said finally, surprised by my own honesty. The official documentation only covers about 60% of what actually happens in the system. The rest is tribal knowledge, workarounds, quick fixes that became permanent, dependencies that aren't properly mapped. Without that context, you'll waste months rediscovering what I already know. Alex nodded thoughtfully. I've noticed some of that already. Solutions that seem counterintuitive until you understand the historical constraints they were addressing. Exactly. And when you inevitably hit those walls, don't assume the original solution was wrong or outdated. There might be very good reasons for those design choices. Like the separate verification pathways for international transactions? My heart stuttered. Among other things, Alex smiled, raising his glass slightly. I appreciate the advice. And, for what it's worth, I think they're making a massive mistake letting you go. As I walked home that night, slightly buzzed and deeply conflicted, I couldn't stop thinking about Alex's question. What would I do differently? The answer that I hadn't given him was simple. I wouldn't have planted a time bomb in the system, set to detonate once I was gone. 2 weeks into my knowledge transfer process, with the bug still lurking undetected in the code, I was beginning to wonder if revenge was worth the collateral damage it would cause, not just to Marshall and the company's reputation, but to Alex and colleagues like Melissa, who had shown me nothing but support. Yet every morning brought a new reminder of my disposability. Another document to sign, another system to explain, another piece of my professional identity stripped. When with each passing day, my departure date loomed closer, and with it, the activation of my digital time bomb. I'd reached the point of no return. The question was no longer whether I would go through with my plan, but whether I could live with myself afterward. Week 3 of my knowledge transfer began with a company-wide email announcing a significant new client, Global Financial Partners, a multinational investment firm that would potentially double quantum dynamics transaction volume. Marshall's message emphasized the exciting growth opportunity and the seamless integration our robust platform would provide. What the email didn't mention was the immense pressure this would put on our systems, particularly the international transaction verification pathway where my time bomb silently waited. Have you seen this? Alex asked, gesturing at the email as I arrived Monday morning. Global Financial Partners is huge. Their international transaction volume alone will stress test everything we've got. I nodded, accepting the now customary coffee he offered. The system can handle it, as long as the integration is done correctly. Alex's eyes lit up with the challenge. We should probably review the scalability protocols, make sure everything's optimized before they come online. The irony wasn't lost. Me? Here was Alex, eager to prepare the system for a major client, while I'd planted code that would jeopardize that very implementation. For a brief moment, I considered warning him, at least hinting at potential issues with the international verification pathway. Instead, I said, let's start with the load balancing configuration. That'll be your biggest concern with the volume increase. As we worked through the scalability protocols, I found myself unconsciously providing more thorough information than I had planned. Professional habits die hard, and despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to deliberately sabotage the Global Financial Partners integration, at least not beyond what my bug would eventually do. By Wednesday, Alex had created an impressive optimization plan for the upcoming integration. His grasp of the system's architecture was remarkable for someone who'd been there less than 3 weeks, and his proposed enhancements showed genuine innovation. What do you think? He asked, showing me the final draft before submitting it to Marshall. I'm particularly concerned about the international verification pathway. The separate architecture makes it harder to predict how it'll respond to sudden volume increases. My stomach tightened. He was zeroing in on exactly the right area of concern, just for the wrong reasons. It's solid, I said after reviewing his plan. But you might want to add some additional monitoring specifically for the international transaction response times. If there are going to be issues, that's where you'll see them first. At least I wasn't lying about that. Alex nodded thoughtfully, adding notes to his document. Good call. Thanks for being so thorough with all this. I know it. Can't be easy. The genuine appreciation in his voice made guilt twist in my gut like a knife. That afternoon, Marshall called an all-hands meeting to formally announce the Global Financial Partners deal. The entire company gathered in the large conference space as he strutted around like a peacock, talking about strategic growth and industry leadership. This partnership represents the culmination of years of building a best-in-class financial technology platform, Marshall declared, his CEO smile cranked to maximum wattage. And it's just the beginning of our expansion strategy. My eyes found Diane in the crowd, watching her nod along enthusiastically. Neither of them glanced in my direction, despite the fact that the best-in-class platform they were bragging about had been largely my creation. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, I overheard Marshall talking to Alex. "Your optimization plan looks excellent," he said, clapping Alex on the shoulder. "This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we brought you on board for. You're already proving to be a valuable addition to the leadership team." Alex, to his credit, looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Jake's been instrumental in helping me understand the system architecture. Most of these optimizations build on his foundational work." Marshall's smile flickered for just a moment. Of course. We all appreciate Jake's contributions." He checked his watch. "Keep me updated on the implementation progress. We're announcing the partnership to shareholders next week, and I want to include details about our enhanced capabilities." As Marshall walked away, Alex turned to find me standing nearby, having heard the entire exchange. "Sorry about that," he said quietly. "He tends to forget who built the foundation he's standing on." I managed a tight smile. "Just get used to it. Next year, when you architect something brilliant, he'll be praising someone else while forgetting your name." The look that crossed Alex's face told me he recognized the truth in my words. Thursday morning brought another complication. A calendar. Invitation from Marshall for a Global Financial Partners integration planning meeting that included Alex, but not me. "That's weird," Alex said when he noticed the invitation. "You should definitely be there. I'll tell Marshall's assistant it must have been an oversight." "It wasn't an oversight," I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the fresh wound to my professional pride. "They're transitioning you into the leadership role. I'm already being erased." Alex frowned. "That's ridiculous. You know this system better than anyone. I'm going to say something." "Don't," I said sharply. "Trust me, it won't help either of us." He looked like he wanted to argue, but reluctantly nodded. "At least help me prepare for the meeting. I want to make sure I'm representing the technical realities accurately." We spent the next hour reviewing the integration requirements and potential challenges. I found myself being surprisingly thorough, professional pride temporarily overcoming my resentment. The Global Financial Partners integration was complex, and despite everything, I didn't want to see it fail catastrophically, just disrupted enough to make a point. After Alex left for the meeting, I sat at my desk staring at my screen, a storm of conflicting emotions churning inside me. Part of me wanted to delete the bug, to ensure a smooth transition for the sake of colleagues like Melissa. Another part wanted to make the bug worse, to create a genuine crisis that would demonstrate exactly how valuable I had been. Instead, I did nothing, letting the digital time bomb tick away unchanged. When Alex returned from the meeting, his expression was troubled. "That bad?" I asked. "Worse," he replied, dropping into his chair. "They've moved up the integration timeline. Global Financial wants to be on our platform before the end of the quarter." "That's barely 3 weeks away," I pointed out. "The system testing alone should take that long." "Marshall promised them we could do it," Alex said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "He kept saying how our agile team could handle the accelerated timeline." Agile team. Right. The team they were actively dismantling by forcing me out. "The worst part," Alex continued, is that when I tried to explain the technical challenges, Marshall kept cutting me off, saying things like, "Alex is still getting up to speed, and our systems are more than capable." I couldn't help but laugh. Welcome to quantum dynamics, where business promises ignore technical realities. "It's not funny," Alex said seriously. "If this integration fails, it could damage the company's reputation significantly, not to mention the financial implications." The weight of my hidden sabotage suddenly felt heavier. I'd planned for my bug to cause disruption, but with the accelerated global financial integration, the impact could be far greater than I'd intended. "Look," I said, making a decision that surprised even me. "Let's map out a realistic integration plan, something that actually addresses the technical requirements instead of Marshall's fantasy timeline. If you present it as a risk mitigation strategy instead of a challenge to his promises, he might listen." Alex looked at me gratefully. "You'd do that? Even though I'm on my way out?" "Yeah. Contrary to what management might think, I actually care about doing things right." We spent the rest of the day creating a detailed integration roadmap that acknowledged the accelerated timeline while building in necessary testing phases. It was some of the best work I'd done in months, ironically for a project I would never see completed. As we wrapped up, Alex asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. "Why are you helping me with this? You could easily let me walk into this disaster unprepared." I considered the question carefully. Because bad code offends me? Because I still have some professional integrity left? Or maybe because watching Marshall explain to Global Financial why their transactions are failing would be more satisfying if it wasn't your head on the chopping block too. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Friday marked the end of my third week of knowledge transfer and brought another unwelcome surprise. An email from Diane requesting a meeting to discuss separation logistics. "They're moving up your departure date," Alex guessed when I mentioned the meeting. "Probably. Now that you've got the global financial integration plan in hand, what do they need me for?" I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice, but failed. "I'll tell them I still need your expertise," Alex offered. "There's no way I've absorbed everything in just 3 weeks." I shook my head. "Don't bother. It won't change anything, and it might put you in a difficult position. Just make sure the integration testing is thorough, especially for the international verification pathway." It was the closest I could come to a warning without revealing my sabotage. The meeting with Diane confirmed Alex's prediction. My departure date had been moved up by a week. Given Alex's exceptional progress and the needs of the business, we feel the knowledge transfer can be completed by next Friday, Diane explained, sliding yet another document across the table. "I thought we agreed on 5 weeks, I said flatly. "The agreement included the provision that the timeline could be adjusted based on business needs," she replied smoothly. "Global financial integration is taking priority, and Alex needs to focus fully on that project." Translation: they didn't want me involved with their prestigious new client. "Fine," I said, signing the updated separation agreement. "Will that be all?" Diane's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing what looked almost like guilt. "Jake, I want you to know that these decisions aren't personal. You've made valuable contributions to quantum dynamics." "Save it," I cut her off. "We both know if my valuable contributions actually mattered, we wouldn't be having this conversation." I walked out without waiting for her response. When I returned to my desk, Alex could tell from my expression what had happened. "They're cutting it short?" "1 more week," I confirmed. "Then I'm officially redundant." He looked genuinely distressed. "That's not enough time. There are still whole sections of the architecture we haven't covered in depth." "Welcome to corporate." "Efficiency," I replied. "Don't worry, you'll figure it out. You're smart enough." "That's not the point," Alex insisted. "It's about respect for your expertise and the value you've created here." His indignation on my behalf was touching, but ultimately meaningless. The decision had been made. "Let's just focus on what we can cover in the time we have left," I suggested. "Starting with the disaster recovery protocols. You'll need those when something inevitably breaks. Like when my bug activated, though I didn't say that part out loud." The weekend gave me time to reflect on my situation and the rapidly approaching activation of my digital time bomb. With my departure now scheduled for the following Friday and the global financial integration happening shortly after, the timing couldn't be more critical. The bug was designed to activate 30 days after my access was revoked, which would put it right around the time Global Financial would be fully onboarded to the platform. The chaos would be significant, demonstrating exactly what happened when you discarded the person who built your system without proper transition. Yet, as I sat in my apartment on Sunday night, staring at my personal laptop and the backup of the bug code I'd saved there, I found myself questioning my plan. The target of my revenge was Marshall and his short-sighted business decisions, but the collateral damage would affect many others, including Alex, who had treated me with nothing but respect, and colleagues like Melissa, who had gone out of their way to show appreciation for my work. Could I really go through with it? The final week of my tenure at Quantum Dynamics began with a strange sense of detachment. My desk was already half emptied, personal items gradually migrating home in my backpack. My calendar was cleared of all recurring meetings. My email notifications had slowed to a trickle as I was removed from distribution lists. I was being digitally erased even before I physically left. Alex, to his credit, seemed determined to extract every ounce of knowledge he could in our remaining days together. He arrived earlier, stayed later, and peppered me with increasingly specific questions about the system architecture. "What about this error handling in the transaction verification system?" he asked Tuesday afternoon, pointing to a section of code I knew intimately, the very module where my bug was hidden. "It seems more complex than it needs to be." My heart raced. "Legacy compatibility," I explained carefully. The error handling was designed to accommodate multiple protocol versions as we transitioned between standards. It wasn't entirely untrue, though the complexity also made it an excellent hiding place for unauthorized code. Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Makes sense. I might look at streamlining it after the global financial integration is stable. Having multiple error handling pathways seems like a potential point of failure. If only he knew." Wednesday brought an awkward transition celebration organized by HR, a sad gathering in the break room with supermarket sheet cake and lukewarm coffee. Marshall made a brief appearance, delivering a generic speech about contributions to the company without making eye contact with me once. Several colleagues made a point of telling me they'd miss me, while others awkwardly avoided conversation altogether. Melissa gave me a hug and whispered, "This is such bullshit," in my ear, which was oddly one of the most comforting moments of the day. Alex hung back during the gathering, clearly uncomfortable with the forced cheerfulness of the occasion. When Marshall cornered him to discuss the global financial integration, I noticed Alex repeatedly trying to include me in the conversation, only to have Marshall subtly redirect. By Thursday, my penultimate day, I had reached a decision point about my hidden bug. I could still access the system, still remove the code if I chose to. By the next day, that option would be gone. The choice would be irreversible. During a quiet moment when Alex was in a meeting with the database team, I opened the transaction verification module and stared at the section where my bug was hidden. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between professional integrity and justified revenge. Before I could decide, Alex returned unexpectedly. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, noticing my intense focus on the screen. "But I needed to ask you something important before you leave tomorrow." I quickly navigated away from the code in question. "What's up?" Alex took a deep breath. "I wanted to know if you'd be willing to consult with us after you leave. As a contractor, there's so much institutional knowledge that I haven't been able to absorb in 4 weeks, and with the global financial integration coming up, the request caught me completely off guard. You want me to come back as a contractor? I've already pitched it to Marshall, Alex continued eagerly. Positioned it as risk mitigation for the integration. He wasn't thrilled, but when I pointed out the potential cost of failure with global financial, he reluctantly agreed, as long as it's limited to the integration period and at a fixed fee. My mind raced. If I came back as a contractor, I'd still have system access when my bug activated. I could fix it before any real damage was done, claiming it was just an unexpected consequence of the increased transaction volume, or I could prevent it from happening at all. What's the timeline you're thinking of? I asked carefully. 2 months starting next week, just until Global Financial is fully onboarded and stable. The rate would be comparable to your current salary, but without benefits, of course. Of course. Heaven forbid Quantum Dynamics provide benefits to someone they considered dispensable. I'll think about it, I said non-committally. Send me the details and I'll review them tonight. Alex looked relieved. I really appreciate it, Jake. Having you available during the transition would make a huge difference. After he walked away, I turned back to my screen, the decision about my bug suddenly more complicated than ever. If I accepted the contractor role, I'd have the power to prevent the disruption I'd planned. If I declined, the bug would activate as scheduled, creating exactly the kind of crisis that would prove how valuable I had been. As the end of my final day approached, I still hadn't given Alex an answer about the consulting offer, or made a final decision about the bug. The contractor paperwork sat in my personal email, unsigned, while the hidden code remained embedded in the system. At 4:30 p.m., Diane appeared at my desk for the final separation process, collecting my badge, walking through the non-compete agreement. One last time, and having me sign the final paperwork. Your system access will be deactivated at 5 p.m., she informed me. Please make sure you've transferred any necessary files to Alex before then. I nodded mechanically, going through the motions of the corporate exit ritual. As Diane walked away, Alex approached with an expression of genuine regret. So this is it, huh? Last day. Looks that way, I replied, surprisingly emotional despite my preparation for this moment. Have you thought about the consulting offer? He asked hopefully. I had thought about little else for the past 24 hours, weighing professional integrity against justified revenge, potential income against personal satisfaction. I have, I said slowly, and I've made my decision. The clock ticked toward 5 p.m., my system access counting down along with it. Whatever choice I made in these final minutes would set an irreversible course, for me, for Alex, for Quantum Dynamics, and for the unsuspecting clients who depended on the system I had built and now potentially sabotaged. The time for indecision had passed. Now I had to live with the consequences of my choice. I'll do it, I told Alex, making my decision in that final moment. Send me the contract tonight and I'll sign it first thing tomorrow. Relief washed over his face. That's great news, Jake. Really. I can't tell you how much this helps. What I didn't tell him was that my decision wasn't purely about professional integrity or even the extra income. It was about control. As a contractor, I'd maintain limited access to the system, enough to monitor my bug and decide its ultimate fate. The power would remain in my hands. Just remember, I added. Marshall agreed to this reluctantly. Don't expect a warm welcome when I show up as a contractor. Alex nodded. I know. But once the global financial integration is successful, he'll see the value. My computer screen flashed with an automated notification. Your system access will expire in 15 minutes. Please save all work and log out properly. The countdown to my digital execution had begun. I should finish clearing out my desk, I said, gesturing to the few personal items remaining. Need help carrying anything to your car? Alex offered. I shook my head. Just my coffee mug and a few books. 8 years in one place, and it all fits in a single backpack. There was something depressing about that fact. How easily physical evidence of my professional existence could be erased. As 5 p.m. approached, several colleagues stopped by to say their goodbyes. Melissa gave me another hug. Frank from the high database team promised to stay in touch. Even some of the newer developers who barely knew me offered awkward handshakes and good luck wishes. At exactly 4:59 p.m., my screen went black, then returned to the login page. I was officially locked out. 1 minute early. Someone in IT was apparently eager to complete the separation process. "That's my cue," I said, standing and slinging my backpack over my shoulder. 8 years of work ended with a simple keyboard. Command executed by someone I'd probably never even met. Alex walked me to the elevator, maintaining an awkward silence until the doors opened. "I'll email you the contract tonight," he promised as I stepped in. "And Jake, thank you. Not just for agreeing to consult, but for everything these past 4 weeks. I know it couldn't have been easy." As the elevator doors closed between us, I wondered if he would still feel grateful once he discovered what I'd hidden in the code. The Seattle evening was unusually clear as I walked to my car, the setting sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. For the first time in 8 years, I wouldn't be returning to this building tomorrow. The realization hit me harder than expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Don't be a stranger. Your desk might be gone, but your friends aren't." At least something positive had come from this mess. A reminder that professional relationships sometimes transcended the corporate bullshit. By the time I arrived home, the contractor agreement was waiting in my inbox, along with a message from Alex, "Contract attached as promised." Legal insisted on all the standard boilerplate, but I've highlighted the important sections. Start date next Monday, if that works for you. Let me know if you have any questions. And thanks again for doing this. I meant what I said earlier. Reviewed the document carefully. The terms were straightforward. A 2-month engagement focused specifically on supporting the global financial partners integration, with a fixed fee that actually worked out to slightly more than my previous salary when calculated hourly. The scope was limited to consultation and troubleshooting. I wouldn't be writing new code or making system changes directly, which meant I wouldn't have the access level needed to remove my bug once it was triggered. I closed the document without signing it, suddenly uncertain again. The contractor role would give me visibility into the aftermath of my sabotage, but not the ability to undo it. Was that what I wanted? To watch the chaos unfold from the inside, witnessing firsthand as Marshall and the company scrambled to understand what was happening? Or did I want the power to prevent the crisis entirely? Sleep eluded me that night as I wrestled with the decision. When morning came, I still hadn't signed the contract, though I'd read and reread it a dozen times. Over coffee, I weighed my options one final time. Option 1, sign the contract, return as a contractor, and warn them about the bug before it is activated. This would showcase my value without causing real damage, potentially leading to a permanent role or at least a strong reference for future jobs. Option 2, sign the contract, return as a contractor, but allow the bug to activate. I would be the hero who identified and fixed the mysterious issue, cementing my value to the company. Option 3, decline the contract and let the bug run its course from afar, enjoying the schadenfreude of quantum dynamics' inevitable struggle. Without me, each choice had its appeal, but only one felt right. After finishing my coffee, I opened the contract, added my digital signature, and sent it back to Alex with a brief message. Signed and attached. See you Monday. Whatever happened next, I wanted to be there to see it. Monday morning felt surreal as I swiped a temporary contractor badge at the security desk. Frank, the security guard, did a double take. "Jake? Thought Friday was your last day." "It was," I confirmed. "I'm back as a contractor for global financial integration." He grinned. "Smart move by the company. You built half this place." "More than half," I corrected with a slight smile. "But don't tell management that." The elevators felt the same. The 12th floor looked the same, but everything was different. My corner desk had already been reassigned to a new developer I didn't recognize. My name had been removed from the department directory on the wall. It was as if my 8 years had been surgically extracted from the building's memory. Alex met me at the temporary workstation they'd set up, a small desk in the corner of the developer area, far from my former position of prominence. "Sorry about the desk," he said quietly. "I requested something better, but space is apparently at a premium right now." I shrugged, setting down my laptop. "I've worked in worse conditions. Remember, I once spent 3 days sleeping under my desk during the cash flow crisis." "Right," Alex smiled. "Well, we've got a team meeting in 20 minutes to go over the global financial integration timeline. Marshall will be there, so be prepared for awkwardness," I finished for him. Got it. The meeting was exactly as uncomfortable as expected. Marshall's surprise at seeing me was poorly concealed beneath a thin veneer of corporate politeness. "Jake," he acknowledged stiffly as I entered the conference room. "Alex mentioned you'd be consulting on the integration. Your familiarity with the legacy systems should be helpful during the transition." Legacy systems. As if the code I'd written was ancient history rather than the foundation of their entire operation. "Happy to help ensure a smooth integration," I replied, with professional detachment. The meeting proceeded with Alex leading the technical discussion, a role that should have been mine if circumstances were different. To his credit, he repeatedly referenced my work and directed technical questions my way, despite Marshall's obvious discomfort. As the team reviewed the integration timeline, I noticed something concerning. The security testing phase had been shortened from 5 days to 2. "That's not enough time for comprehensive security testing," I pointed out when Alex paused for questions, "especially for the international transaction verification protocols that Global Financial will heavily utilize." Marshall dismissed my concern with a wave. "The testing schedule has been approved by the executive team based on Global Financial's timeline requirements. We can't afford delays. And you can't afford security breaches or transaction failures either," I countered. "At minimum, the international verification pathway needs full testing. It's the most complex part of the system." Alex backed me up, immediately. "Jake's right. That's one area where we can't cut corners. The international transactions have unique verification requirements that could cause significant issues if not properly tested." He had no idea how right he was. Marshall's jaw tightened, but faced with both of us advocating the same position, he reluctantly conceded. "Fine. Extend the security testing for the international verification pathway to 4 days, but compress the other testing phases to compensate. We're not pushing back the go-live date." Small victory, but I'd take it. The extended testing might even reveal my bug before it activated, which, ironically, now seemed like the preferable outcome. Better to find and fix it during testing than have it disrupt actual client transactions. The rest of the week fell into an unexpected rhythm. Despite my contractor status, the development team still treated me as the system authority, coming to me with questions and issues that Alex couldn't yet answer. Alex himself proved to be a quick study but readily acknowledged the gaps in his knowledge, deferring to my expertise without ego. Marshall, meanwhile, maintained a careful distance, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary and always with that same corporate politeness that barely masked his discomfort at my continued presence. By Thursday, I had made my decision about the bug. During a rare moment alone at my workstation, I opened a secure connection to the system and began typing commands that would allow me to examine the international transaction verification code. Not to remove the bug, but to understand exactly what would happen when it triggered. What I found surprised me. The code I'd written in anger was more elegant than I remembered. It wouldn't cause catastrophic failure, but rather introduce subtle authentication delays in international transactions, gradually increasing until they became noticeable to clients. The log files would show cryptic errors pointing to the verification pathway I'd never documented, making diagnosis difficult but not impossible. It was, in essence, the digital equivalent of a car making a strange noise that only an experienced mechanic would know how to diagnose. Not lethal, but concerning enough to require specialized knowledge to fix. I could live with that. The bug would make its point without causing irreparable damage to the company or its clients. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected development. Alex stopped by my temporary desk, looking troubled. "Just got out of a meeting with Marshall," he said quietly. "There's been a change to the global financial implementation plan." "Let me guess," I replied. "They want to accelerate the timeline again." Alex shook his head. "Worse, they want to implement a new verification protocol for international transactions, something Marshall claims will streamline the client experience. It's coming directly from the executive team, apparently based on feedback from Global Financial." My blood ran cold. A new verification protocol would require rewriting significant portions of the current system. It's not something you implement days before a major client integration. "That's what I told him," Alex said, frustration evident in his voice. "But he's insisting it's non-negotiable, said it was a key factor in winning the global financial contract." "Do you have the specifications for this new protocol?" Alex handed me a document. "Just got them. They want implementation to begin immediately, with completed code by next Wednesday." I scanned the document, my concern growing with each page. The proposed changes would completely restructure the international verification pathway, potentially neutralizing my bug but also introducing significant new risks. "This is insanity," I said finally. "These changes touch critical security components of the system. Implementing them without proper testing is asking for trouble." "So we push back?" Alex asked. I considered our options. Pushing back against Marshall had rarely worked in the past, but these changes went beyond corporate stubbornness into genuinely dangerous territory. "We need data," I decided. "Run a simulation of these changes against historical transaction logs. Show Marshall exactly what could happen if this implementation fails." Alex nodded. "Good idea. I'll set up the simulation now." As he walked away, I realized the irony of the situation. I was now actively working to prevent a potential system failure, one that might overshadow or even prevent my own planned disruption. The weekend passed in a blur of remote work as Alex and I collaborated on the simulation. By Monday morning, we had compelling evidence that Marshall's rushed protocol implementation was a disaster waiting to happen. The simulation shows a 37% failure rate for complex international transactions, Alex explained as we prepared for our meeting with Marshall. "And that's with ideal conditions. Under actual load, it could be much worse." "He'll push back," I warned. "Be prepared for him to claim the simulation is flawed or too conservative." "That's why I ran it 3 different ways," Alex replied with a slight smile. "Same result each time. Even the most optimistic scenario shows a 22% failure rate." I felt a surprising surge of pride. Alex was learning quickly, not just about the technical systems, but about navigating corporate politics as well. Marshall's reaction to our presentation was predictably defensive. "These simulations are based on theoretical conditions," he argued, dismissing our carefully compiled data with a wave of his hand. "The actual implementation will be optimized for Global Financial's specific needs." "With respect, Marshall," Alex countered. "These simulations use actual transaction data from our production environment. There's nothing theoretical about a 37% failure rate. Not to mention," I added, "the security implications of rushing a new verification protocol without proper testing. We'd be creating vulnerabilities in our most sensitive system component." Marshall's expression hardened. "I appreciate the concern, but this implementation has been promised to Global Financial. Their leadership has made it clear this is a condition of our partnership." "Then we need to reset their expectations," I said bluntly. Better to delay the implementation than deliver a broken system. That's not your decision to make, Marshall snapped, finally dropping the veneer of corporate politeness. Either of you. The business requirements have been set. Your job is to implement them, not question them. Alex straightened in his chair. Actually, Marshall, my job is to ensure the technical integrity of our platform. And right now, that means advising against a rushed implementation that our own data shows will fail. I glanced at Alex with newfound respect. Standing up to the CEO was no small thing, especially for someone still in their probationary period. Marshall's face flushed with anger. This isn't a debate. The implementation proceeds as planned. If you can't deliver it, Alex, perhaps we need to reconsider your role here. The threat hung in the air, reminding me all too clearly of my own experience. Before Alex could respond, I intervened. There might be a compromise approach. What if we implemented a modified version of the protocol? One that preserves the core security architecture while addressing global financial's specific requirements. Marshall's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of modification? A transitional? Implementation, I explained, thinking quickly. We maintain the existing verification pathway but add a parallel process specifically for global financials transactions. It gives them the streamlined experience they want without compromising the entire system. Alex caught on immediately. That could work. We'd need to build some additional monitoring tools, but it would be much less risky than a complete overhaul. Marshall considered the proposal, obviously weighing his promise to Global Financial against the risk of a failed implementation. How quickly could this transitional approach be ready? He asked finally. 2 weeks, I said confidently, with proper testing. Global Financial expects implementation next week, Marshall countered. Then give them a beta version, I suggested. A limited implementation they can test with non-critical transactions. It meets their timeline while giving us the runway to do this properly. For a moment, I thought Marshall would reject the compromise outright. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Draft a proposal for this approach by tomorrow morning, he instructed Alex. Include timelines and resource requirements. If it's feasible, we'll present it to Global Financial as an enhanced implementation strategy. As we left the meeting, Alex shook his head in disbelief. That actually worked. I was sure he was going to fire me on the spot. He considered it, I replied. But the risk of failing with Global Financial scared him more than his ego. It's probably the first time reality has won out over his promises. Thank you for jumping in with the compromise, Alex said. It was brilliant. Gives us the time we need while still letting Marshall save face with the client. What I didn't tell Alex was that my proposed solution had another benefit. It would isolate Global Financial's transactions from the verification pathway where my bug was hidden, potentially sparing them from the disruption while still allowing the bug to make its point within Quantum's general system. A perfect compromise indeed. One that served both my professional integrity and my desire for justified revenge. As we worked on the proposal that evening, I found myself in the strange position of actively protecting a company that had discarded me while simultaneously maintaining my plan to teach them a lesson. The contradiction wasn't lost on me, but somehow it felt like the right balance, supporting the system's integrity while ensuring management would still face consequences for their short-sighted decisions. The bug would still activate in 3 weeks, but now, thanks to our transitional implementation, the impact would be contained, affecting Quantum Dynamics' reputation without harming Global Financial or causing catastrophic failure. It was, I decided, the perfect revenge, subtle, but undeniable proof of my value, delivered precisely when they thought they could succeed without me. The next morning, our transitional implementation proposal sat in Marshall's inbox, a comprehensive document outlining a solution that would satisfy Global Financial's requirements without compromising system integrity. Alex had worked late into the night refining, the technical specifications, while I'd contributed the implementation strategy and risk mitigation plan. "Do you think he'll actually read it?" Alex asked as we waited for Marshall's response. "The executive summary, maybe," I replied. "The technical details? Not a chance. But he'll need to understand enough to sell it to Global Financial." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "It's strange. I've worked at 3 different tech companies, and the pattern is always the same. Executives making technical promises they don't understand, then expecting engineering to somehow make it work. The difference is how they react when reality intrudes on their promises," I said. "Good leaders adjust their expectations. Bad ones blame the engineers." "And Marshall?" I gave him a knowing look. "Why do you think I'm working as a contractor now instead of leading this integration as an employee?" Before Alex could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Marshall's assistant. "Meeting with Marshall and Global Financial Leadership. 11:30 a.m. Bring technical resources to discuss implementation strategy." "Technical resources," Alex read aloud with a grimace. "That's us, I suppose." "Corporate speak for people who know what they're talking about," I confirmed. "Looks like your proposal got his attention." The meeting was held in the executive boardroom, a space I'd rarely entered during my 8 years at Quantum Dynamics. The room was designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, a massive polished table, and chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marshall sat at the head of the table, flanked by Diane and 2 executives from Global Financial, a silver-haired man introduced as Thomas Reeves, their chief technology officer, and a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa Harlow, their head of operations. Alex and I took seats toward the middle of the table, clearly positioned as technical support rather than key decision-makers. As I was explaining, Marshall continued smoothly after introductions. "Our team has developed an enhanced implementation strategy that we believe will better serve Global Financial's needs while ensuring system stability." He nodded toward Alex. "Our chief technology strategist will walk you through the approach." I noticed he made no attempt to introduce me or explain my presence. To the Global Financial executives, I was just anonymous technical staff. Alex launched into a clear, concise explanation of our transitional implementation plan, highlighting how it would provide Global Financial with the streamlined experience they wanted while maintaining the security and stability they required. "The key advantage," he concluded, "is that this approach allows us to deliver on your timeline without compromising system integrity. The beta implementation next week gives you immediate functionality, while the full rollout 2 weeks later ensures comprehensive testing and optimization." Thomas Reeves, the Global Financial CTO, looked impressed. "This actually addresses several concerns our technical team raised about the original timeline. The parallel processing approach is elegant." "I'm curious about the security implications," Vanessa Harlow interjected, fixing Alex with a penetrating stare. "How do we ensure that our transactions remain fully protected during this transitional phase?" Alex hesitated momentarily, then glanced my way. "Jake, would you mind addressing the security architecture? You designed the original verification system." Marshall's expression tightened at this acknowledgement of my role, but he said nothing as I leaned forward. "The transitional implementation preserves all existing security protocols," I explained, directing my response to Vanessa. "In fact, during the beta phase, your transactions will undergo both the streamlined verification and our standard security checks, essentially providing double authentication without impacting performance." "And you're confident this can be delivered in the time frame outlined?" Thomas asked. "With the proper resources, yes," I confirmed, deliberately looking at Marshall. "As long as there's no further compression of the testing phase." Marshall forced a smile. "We're fully committed to allocating whatever resources necessary to ensure a successful implementation." The meeting continued for another hour, with the Global Financial executives asking detailed technical questions that Marshall couldn't answer, but was forced to defer to Alex and me. By the end, it was clear that our approach had won them over, and equally clear that Marshall was uncomfortable with how the dynamic had played out. As the global financial team departed, Marshall turned to Alex. "Good presentation. Send me a revised project plan by the end of day incorporating their feedback." He didn't acknowledge me at all before walking out. "Well, that went better than expected," Alex said once we were alone. "Though I think Marshall was hoping to take more credit for the solution. He'll still claim it was his idea in the next executive meeting," I predicted. "But at least we bought ourselves the time needed to do this right." "About that," Alex said, his expression turning serious. "I noticed something strange while reviewing the code logs last night. There was an unauthorized update to the international verification system about a month ago, right around your departure announcement." My heart froze. "What kind of update?" "That's just it. I can't tell. The code changes were embedded within a routine security patch, but they don't seem to correspond to any documented updates. I tried tracing the execution path, but it's incredibly complex." He was finding my bug sooner than I'd anticipated. Kept my expression neutral. Security patches often include undocumented optimizations. It was probably something I implemented but didn't have time to document before the transition began. Alex didn't look entirely convinced. "Maybe, but given how meticulous your other documentation is, it seems odd. I'd like to dig deeper, see exactly what these changes do." "It's probably nothing critical," I said carefully. "But sure, we can review it together if you're concerned, after the global financial implementation plan is finalized." He nodded, thankfully accepting the deflection. "You're right. Priorities first. I'll add it to the technical debt list for later investigation." Crisis temporarily averted. But now I faced a dilemma. Alex was a better developer than I'd given him credit for. He'd spotted the anomaly in the code logs, and it was only a matter of time before he traced it to my hidden bug. What would happen then? If he discovered it before activation, the whole point of my revenge would be lost. If he found it after, he might realize I'd known about it all along while contracting for them, potentially violating my agreement and even risking legal repercussions. I needed a new plan, one that would allow me to maintain plausible deniability, while still ensuring Marshall and the executive team learned their lesson. That evening, as Alex and I worked on the revised implementation plan, I casually brought up the international verification system again. "You mentioned finding some undocumented changes earlier," I said, trying to sound merely professionally curious. "When did you say they were implemented?" "About 4 weeks ago," Alex replied, pulling up the code logs on his screen. "Look at this timestamp. It's buried within a standard security update, but these specific changes don't correspond to any ticket in the system." I leaned over, examining the logs he'd identified. He was good. He'd found exactly the window where I'd implemented my bug. "Interesting," I said noncommittally. "I remember working on security optimizations around that time, but the specific changes might have been handled by one of the junior developers. Let me think about who might have been involved. It was a calculated risk, implying the changes might have come from someone else on my former team, creating plausible deniability for myself while giving us both an avenue to investigate further if needed." "Could be," Alex agreed. "Though the code style looks like yours. Those nested conditional statements are your signature approach." Damn. He'd even identified my coding style. This guy was observant. I had several developers I mentored who adopted similar patterns, I said, which was true enough. But again, let's table this for now. The global financial implementation is our priority. He agreed, and we returned to finalizing the project plan. But I knew the issue wouldn't stay buried for long. I needed to make a decision about the bug, and soon, the next few days were consumed by preparation for the global financial beta implementation. Marshall, eager to demonstrate progress to the client, had scheduled a formal handover ceremony for Friday, just 1 week after our initial meeting. It's mostly for show, Alex explained as we prepared the demonstration environment. Global Financial will only be processing a handful of test transactions through the system, but Marshall wants to make it a big deal for the executive team. Classic Marshall, I replied. Form over function. The beta implementation itself was coming together nicely. Alex and I had worked with the development team to create a streamlined version of the international verification pathway, one that would operate in parallel with the existing system during the testing phase. What Alex didn't know was that I'd taken the opportunity to examine my bug more closely during this process. It was still there, dormant in the main verification system, set to activate in exactly 2 weeks. But with the new parallel pathway in place for Global Financial, their transactions would bypass the affected code entirely. It was the perfect scenario. My bug would still expose Quantum's vulnerability exactly as planned, but without impacting their highest-profile client. The company would learn its lesson about discarding valuable institutional knowledge, but in a controlled way that wouldn't cause catastrophic damage. On Thursday afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived at our workspace. Thomas Reeves, the global financial CTO. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, approaching our desks. "I was in the building for a meeting with Marshall and thought I'd stop by to see how the technical implementation is progressing." Alex quickly stood to greet him. "Mr. Reeves, welcome. We're actually just finalizing the beta environment now. Would you like a demonstration?" "I'd love one," Thomas replied, then turned to me. "And please, call me Thomas. I didn't catch your name at the meeting earlier this week." "Jake Wilson," I introduced myself. "Systems architect." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Wilson, you designed the original transaction verification system, didn't you? I remember reading about it in a fintech journal a few years back. Impressive work." The fact that Thomas recognized my name when Marshall could barely acknowledge my existence wasn't lost on me. "That's right," I confirmed. "I've been brought back as a consultant for this integration." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Smart move. Too many companies discard institutional knowledge in the name of innovation when what they really mean is cost-cutting." He'd hit the nail on the head so accurately that both Alex and I momentarily fell silent. "Anyway," Thomas continued, seemingly unaware of the effect his comment had on us, "I'd love to see what you've built for the beta implementation." Alex led him through a demonstration of the parallel verification system, explaining how it would process Global Financial's international transactions with enhanced efficiency while maintaining security integrity. "The architecture is elegant," Thomas commented, clearly impressed. "Who designed this transitional approach?" "It was a collaborative effort," Alex said diplomatically. "Jake suggested the parallel processing concept, and we refined it together." Thomas turned to me with newfound interest. "Are you planning to stay on after the integration, Jake? We're always looking for talent with this kind of architectural vision at Global Financial." The question caught me off guard. "My contract with Quantum is just for the integration period," I replied carefully. "After that, I'm keeping my options open." "Well, consider us one of those options," Thomas said, handing me his business card. "I'd be interested in discussing opportunities once your contract here concludes." After Thomas left, Alex stared at me with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Did Global Financial's CFO just try to poach you right in front of me?" "I think he did," I confirmed, equally surprised. "Though technically I'm already poached, just on a temporary basis." "Marshall would have a meltdown if he knew." Alex chuckled, then grew serious. "Would you consider it, working for Global Financial?" I turned the business card over in my hand. "Maybe. It would be ironic, getting fired by Quantum only to end up working for their biggest client." "Poetic justice," Alex agreed. "Though selfishly, I'd rather you stayed on here. There's still so much I could learn from you." His sincerity was touching, but I knew Marshall would never approve a long-term role for me at Quantum, regardless of my value. The best I could hope for was an extended contract, always at arm's length, never fully reintegrated into the company. Friday's beta implementation ceremony was exactly the corporate theater I'd expected. Marshall had arranged for professional photographers, catering, and even branded gift bags for the global financial executives. The actual technical handover, Alex and I deploying the beta environment and processing the first test transactions, took less than 15 minutes, but the surrounding spectacle stretched for hours. And this marks the beginning of a transformative partnership, Marshall declared during his speech, champagne flute in hand. Quantum dynamics and global financial, leveraging cutting-edge technology to revolutionize international finance. Standing. At the back of the room with Alex, I could barely contain my eye rolls. Cutting-edge technology was a bit of a stretch for a system that was fundamentally built on architecture I'd designed years ago. He does know that the actual integration isn't live yet, right? I whispered to Alex. This is just the beta environment. Details, Alex whispered back. Never let reality interfere with a good photo opportunity. I noticed Thomas Reeves watching Marshall with a similar skepticism, occasionally glancing our way as if to confirm that the technical team wasn't buying the hyperbole either. After the formal presentations, as guests mingled with drinks and appetizers, Thomas made his way over to us. Quite the celebration for a beta launch, he commented dryly. One might think we'd already completed the full integration. Marshall likes to get ahead of himself, I replied, matching his tone. Thomas nodded. I've noticed. Fortunately, his technical team seems more grounded in reality. We try, Alex said modestly. Have you given any thought to my offer, Jake? Thomas asked, lowering his voice slightly. I'm still considering my options, I replied truthfully. But I appreciate the interest. Thomas handed me a folder. Some information about our technical division, in case you're curious. We're doing interesting work with blockchain verification that might align with your expertise. As he walked away, Alex raised an eyebrow. He's really serious about recruiting you. Apparently. I tucked the folder into my bag, oddly flattered by the interest, even as I wondered how Thomas would feel if he knew about the bug I'd planted in Quantum's system. The thought brought me back to my ongoing dilemma. What to do about the bug that was now just 2 weeks from activation? Alex had already noticed anomalies in the code logs. If he continued investigating, he might find it before it triggered. If that happened, the entire point of my revenge would be lost. But if I disabled it now, Marshall would never learn the lesson I'd intended to teach him about the value of institutional knowledge and the cost of discarding loyal employees. There was a third option, one I'd been considering more seriously since Thomas's job offer. I could let Alex find the bug, but position myself as the solution rather than the cause. If I guided his investigation in the right direction, timing it to coincide with the bug's activation, I could be the hero who identified and fixed the mysterious issue, demonstrating my value one final time before potentially departing for global financial. It was manipulative, certainly. Ethically questionable, absolutely. But it would achieve my goal of exposing Quantum's vulnerability without causing lasting damage, while potentially securing my professional future. As the celebration wound down, Marshall approached us. The first time he'd directly acknowledged my presence all day. The global financial team seems impressed with the beta implementation, he said, addressing Alex while barely glancing my way. Thomas mentioned architectural elegance specifically. Jake designed the parallel processing approach, Alex said pointedly. It was his idea to maintain dual verification during the transition. Marshall's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, well, good teamwork all around. Alex, we have a steering committee meeting Monday morning to discuss next steps. 8 a.m. sharp. He walked away without inviting me to the meeting or even acknowledging Alex's comment. Some things never change, I remarked, watching Marshall return to the global financial executives with his CEO smile firmly in place. "Does it bother you?" Alex asked. "The way he refuses to acknowledge your contributions?" I considered the question carefully. "It used to. A lot. Now," I shrugged. "I'm beginning to realize his opinion matters less than I thought. The people who actually understand the work, like Thomas, they see the value. And in 2 weeks, when my bug activated, Marshall would be forced to see it too. One way or another, the reckoning was coming. The only question that remained was what role I would play when it did. Saboteur, savior, or something in between. The weekend after the beta implementation ceremony gave me time to reflect on my evolving situation. Sitting in my apartment with Thomas Reeves's folder spread across my coffee table, I weighed my options with unprecedented clarity. The global financial opportunity was legitimate and impressive. Their blockchain verification initiative aligned perfectly with my expertise, and the compensation package outlined in the materials exceeded even my former quantum salary. More importantly, Thomas seemed to genuinely value technical expertise and institutional knowledge, a refreshing contrast to Marshall's approach. But accepting would mean leaving before my bug activated, abandoning the revenge I'd so carefully planned. Unless a new possibility formed in my mind. What if I accepted Thomas's offer but timed my departure to coincide with the bug's activation? I could leave Quantum for Global Financial, and days later, when international transactions began failing, Quantum would be forced to call me back as an emergency consultant at premium rates. I'd be positioned as the savior rather than the saboteur, with plausible deniability about the bug's origins. It was elegant, if undeniably calculating. But before I could execute such a plan, I needed to ensure Alex wouldn't discover the bug prematurely. Monday morning brought a new complication. Alex greeted me with troubling news as soon as I arrived. "I've been reviewing those undocumented changes we discussed," he said, lowering his voice despite our relatively isolated workstation. "There's definitely something unusual in the international verification pathway. I can't pinpoint exactly what it does, but it seems designed to activate based on a timestamp trigger." My pulse quickened. He was getting dangerously close to uncovering my bug. "That sounds concerning," I replied, carefully maintaining a neutral expression. "But probably not critical for the global financial implementation since we're using the parallel pathway." "True, but I'm worried about the main system," Alex persisted. "If there's an undocumented feature with a time trigger, we should understand what it does before it activates." "When is the trigger set for?" I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to gauge how much he'd discovered. Alex frowned. "That's the strange part. The timestamp logic is obfuscated, wrapped in multiple conditional statements that make it hard to decipher. Based on the pattern, I think it's scheduled to execute in the next week or two, but I can't be certain." This was bad. He'd identified both the existence of the bug and its approximate activation timeframe. If he continued digging, he'd eventually trace it back to me. "Let me take a look," I offered, making a split-second decision. "I might recognize the code pattern if it's something I or my team implemented." Alex looked relieved. "That would be great. I've been puzzled over it all weekend." He pulled up the code section on his screen, pointing to the exact module where my bug resided. The trigger mechanism was indeed complex, intentionally so. I'd designed it to be difficult to interpret without knowing exactly what to look for. I studied the screen, feigning careful consideration while rapidly formulating a new plan. I couldn't let Alex discover the full nature of the bug, but I also couldn't dismiss his concerns entirely. I needed a plausible explanation that would temporarily satisfy him without revealing the truth. "Ah," I said finally, affecting a look of recognition. "I think I know what this is. During my last few weeks, we were implementing enhanced security monitoring for international transactions, a sort of tripwire system to detect potential fraud. patterns. It wasn't entirely a lie. We had discussed such a system, though we'd never implemented it. The timestamp trigger is probably set to activate the monitoring after a sufficient baseline of transaction data has been collected, I continued. It's designed to run silently in the background, logging patterns but not interfering with transactions. Alex looked skeptical. Why isn't it documented anywhere? Something this significant should be in the system docs. The implementation was rushed, I replied, which was true enough. Marshall wanted enhanced security features for the quarterly board presentation, but we didn't have time to complete the documentation before my transition began. He frowned, considering this explanation. It still seems odd. The code structure is more complex than necessary for a monitoring feature. Security implementations often are, I countered smoothly. We deliberately obfuscate those features to make them harder for potential attackers to identify and circumvent. It was standard security practice, which lent credibility to my explanation. I suppose that makes sense, Alex conceded, though not entirely convinced. Still, we should probably document it properly now, especially with the global financial integration approaching completion. Good idea, I agreed, seeing an opportunity to redirect his attention. Why don't you focus on the final integration tasks and I'll work on documenting this security feature properly? Since I was involved in the original implementation, it'll be faster if I handle it. Alex hesitated, then nodded. That works. I've got the steering committee follow-up from this morning anyway. Marshall wants detailed timelines for the full implementation by end of day. Crisis temporarily averted. Once Alex turned his attention to the steering committee deliverables, I began crafting a detailed but entirely fictitious documentation for the security monitoring feature I'd described. The document needed to be convincing enough to satisfy Alex's curiosity without encouraging him to dig deeper into the actual code. By lunchtime, I'd created a comprehensive specification that explained the supposed security monitoring system, complete with data flow diagrams and monitoring parameters. The document described a system that would activate on the exact date my bug was set to trigger, but characterized the activation as the initiation of enhanced fraud detection rather than the introduction of transaction delays. I sent the document to Alex with a note. First draft of the security monitoring documentation. Let me know if you need any clarification. His response came quickly. This looks solid. Much more complex than I expected. No wonder it wasn't documented before your departure. This would have taken days to write up properly. If only he knew. Rest of the day passed uneventfully, with Alex focused on the steering committee deliverables and me pretending to fine-tune the security documentation while actually considering my next steps. The job offer from Global Financial remained top of mind, as did the looming activation of my bug. Tuesday morning brought Thomas Reeves back to Quantum's offices, this time for a technical review of the beta implementation results. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., with both Alex and me invited to present the performance metrics. Before the meeting, Thomas sought me out specifically. Jake, got a minute? He asked, approaching our workstation. Of course, I replied, standing to greet him. He gestured toward an empty conference room. Mind if we chat privately? Alex raised an eyebrow but said nothing as I followed Thomas into the room. I'll be direct, Thomas said once the door closed. I'm impressed with your work on this integration, particularly the parallel processing architecture. It's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need at Global Financial. Thank you, I replied, genuinely appreciative of the recognition. I've discussed your background with our technical leadership team, he continued. We'd like to formally offer you a position as Senior Solutions Architect in our blockchain division. The role would start in 3 weeks, after your contract with Quantum concludes. 3 weeks, just after my bug was set to activate. The timing was almost too perfect. I'm definitely interested, I said carefully. Though I should mention that Marshall might attempt to extend my contract if the integration requires additional support. Thomas smiled knowingly. Based on what I've observed of Marshall, he'll try to extract maximum value from your expertise while keeping you at arm's length. That's not how we operate at Global Financial. We're offering you a permanent leadership position with the resources to build your own team. The contrast was striking and tempting. Can I have a few days to consider? I asked, though my mind was already racing ahead to how this might fit with my evolving plan. Of course. We're prepared to be flexible on the start date if necessary, Thomas assured me. Just let me know by Friday. As we exited the conference room, I noticed Marshall watching us from the hallway, his expression a mixture of suspicion and irritation. He clearly wasn't pleased to see Thomas engaging with me directly. The technical review meeting that followed was tense, with Marshall repeatedly attempting to steer the conversation away from the architectural details that Thomas seemed most interested in. Whenever I spoke, Marshall would quickly jump in to clarify or redirect, making it obvious he was uncomfortable with my level of engagement with Global Financial's CTO. After the meeting, Marshall pulled Alex aside, deliberately excluding me from the conversation. Though I couldn't hear exactly what was said, Alex's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable, and he kept glancing my way apologetically. When Alex returned to our workstation, his discomfort was palpable. Marshall wants me to handle all direct communications with Global Financial moving forward, he explained reluctantly. Says it's to maintain a consistent point of contact for the client. Translation: keep me away from Thomas Reeves, I interpreted flatly. Alex nodded, embarrassed. Pretty much. I told him it was ridiculous since you're critical to the technical implementation, but he insisted. Don't worry about it, I assured him. It's not your fault Marshall feels threatened. Threatened? By what? I hesitated, then decided Alex deserved to know. Thomas offered me a position at Global Financial, Senior Solutions Architect. Alex's eyes widened. Wow, Are you going to take it? I'm considering it, I admitted. The role aligns well with my expertise, and the company culture seems less... I searched for a diplomatic word. Dysfunctional? Alex suggested. I laughed. I was going to say hierarchical, but your word is more accurate. Alex was quiet for a moment. I can't blame you for considering it. Though selfishly, I wish you'd stay here. You've taught me more in the past few weeks than I learned in a year at my previous company. His sincerity was touching, and complicated my already conflicted feelings about my hidden bug. Whatever I decide, I promised, I'll make sure the Global Financial integration is completed successfully before I leave. It wasn't a lie. I fully intended to ensure the parallel verification pathway was functioning perfectly before my departure. The main system, where my bug was hidden, was another matter entirely. Wednesday brought a new development. Marshall, apparently concerned about Thomas's interest in recruiting me, suddenly became unusually solicitous. Jake, he called out as he passed our workstation. Got a minute? I'd like to discuss the integration timeline. I followed him to his office, a space I'd rarely been invited into during my 8 years as an employee. I've been reviewing the project status, Marshall began once we were seated. Alex speaks very highly of your contributions to the integration effort. We make a good team, I replied neutrally, curious where this was heading. Marshall nodded, a calculating look in his eyes. Which brings me to my point. Your current contract ends in 2 weeks, but given the complexity of the Global Financial integration, we're considering an extension. Another 3 months, same terms. There it was. Exactly as Thomas had predicted. Marshall wanted to keep extracting value from my expertise without offering a permanent position or even improved terms. Appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I've received some other opportunities I'm considering. Marshall's expression tightened. From Global Financial, I assume? Thomas Reeves has been quite attentive during his visits. I'm exploring several options, I replied, deliberately vague. Well, before you make any decisions, Marshall leaned forward. Consider that Quantum might be open to discussing a more permanent arrangement, depending on the success of the global financial integration, of course. The conditional nature of the offer wasn't lost on me. Even now, he was dangling the possibility of re-employment as a carrot, contingent on my performance and his needs. I'll keep that in mind, I said noncommittally. As I left Marshall's office, I felt oddly detached from the anger that had fueled my actions just weeks ago. His transparent attempt to counter Thomas's offer only highlighted the transactional way he viewed employees, as resources to be acquired or discarded based on immediate business needs, with no loyalty or long-term investment. By contrast, Thomas had recognized my value immediately and offered a position based on my demonstrated expertise, not as a reluctant concession to prevent me from joining a client's company. The choice was becoming clearer, though the timing and execution still required careful consideration. Thursday morning, Alex approached me with renewed concerns about the code I'd characterized as a security monitoring feature. "I've been reviewing your documentation," he said, "and while it's comprehensive, something still doesn't add up. The code structure doesn't quite match the functionality you've described." My stomach tightened. He wasn't letting this go. "In what way?" I asked, maintaining my composure. "The trigger mechanism interacts with the transaction verification process in ways that seem unnecessary for passive monitoring," Alex explained. "It looks more like it could potentially alter verification parameters rather than just logging them." He was getting dangerously close to the truth. "The monitoring system does include adaptive parameters," I improvised. "It's designed to adjust its detection thresholds based on observed transaction patterns. That might explain the interaction you're seeing." Alex frowned. "Maybe. But without seeing it in action, it's hard to be certain." "When did you say it's scheduled to activate?" "The exact date would depend on when the code was implemented," I hedged. "Based on the timestamp logic, probably within the next week or so." "I'm thinking we should maybe disable it until after the global financial integration is complete," Alex suggested. "Just as a precaution. We can always reactivate it later when we have time to properly test and validate its behavior." This was the scenario I'd been dreading. Alex proposing to disable my bug before it could activate. I needed to dissuade him without seeming suspiciously defensive. "Disabling security features right before onboarding a major client isn't ideal," I argued, "especially when we don't fully understand the dependencies involved. We could inadvertently create vulnerabilities in the verification process." Alex considered this. "That's a fair point, but I'm uncomfortable having an undocumented feature activating during such a critical period." "What about a compromise?" I suggested. "Instead of disabling it, we could implement additional monitoring specifically watching for any unexpected behavior when it activates. That way, we'd have early warning of any issues without risking security degradation. This approach would allow my bug to activate as planned, while giving me the opportunity to characterize any resulting issues as unexpected side effects, rather than intentional sabotage." Alex nodded slowly. "That could work. We'd need to define the monitoring parameters carefully to catch any anomalies quickly." "I can draft a monitoring plan this afternoon," I offered, relieved to have steered him away from disabling the code. "Great," Alex agreed. "Once that's in place, I'll feel better about the timeline." Crisis averted, but it was clear that Alex wouldn't stop investigating. His technical intuition was telling him something wasn't right, and sooner or later he'd figure it out. I needed to finalize my plan before that happened. By Friday morning, I'd made my decision. After careful consideration of all my options, I composed 2 emails. The first went to Thomas Reeves, accepting his job offer with a proposed start date, 3 weeks from Monday, 10 days after my bug was set to activate. The timing would allow me to be gone from Quantum when the issues began, but available to return as an emergency consultant if needed. The second email went to Marshall, declining his contract extension offer and informing him that I'd be completing my current engagement as agreed, but would not be continuing beyond that. I deliberately didn't mention my new position with Global Financial, leaving that revelation for when it would have maximum impact. As I sent both emails, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. My path was now set. I would complete the Global Financial implementation as promised, allow my bug to activate as planned, and transition to my new role with their company. If Quantum called me back in a panic when international transactions began failing, I would help resolve the issue, for appropriate emergency consulting rates, while maintaining plausible deniability about its origins. It wasn't the straightforward revenge I'd initially planned, but it was perhaps something more satisfying, a scenario that would force Marshall to recognize my value while simultaneously demonstrating that better opportunities awaited those whose contributions were undervalued. The bug would still serve its purpose, teaching quantum dynamics an expensive lesson about discarding institutional knowledge. But now, instead of watching the chaos from afar, I'd be positioned to benefit professionally from the inevitable fallout. As Alex and I worked side by side that day, finalizing the monitoring plan for the security feature that was actually my hidden bug, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the few weeks since I'd planted it. What had begun as an act of pure revenge had evolved into something more nuanced, a calculated career move that would ultimately benefit me more than simple retribution ever could. The question that remained was whether I could live with the deception involved, particularly regarding Alex, who had shown me nothing but respect and collegiality throughout our time working together. But that was a moral dilemma for another day. For now, I had an integration to complete, a new job to prepare for, and a digital time bomb counting down to vindication. The final week of my contract with Quantum Dynamics unfolded with mounting tension. Marshall's reaction to my resignation. Email had been predictably self-serving, first dismissive, then aggressively attempting to extract my future plans, and finally making a belated counteroffer when he realized I was serious about leaving. "I hope you're not making a decision you'll regret," he said during an awkward conversation in the hallway. "Global Financial might seem appealing from the outside, but they have their own challenges." "I appreciate your concern," I replied, neutrally, neither confirming nor denying his assumption about my destination. "But I've considered my options carefully." His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, the door remains open if circumstances change. Sometimes the grass isn't actually greener." What Marshall failed to understand was that this wasn't about finding greener grass. It was about being valued for my contributions, rather than treated as a disposable resource. Alex took the news of my departure with genuine disappointment. "I was hoping you might stay on," he admitted as we worked through the final implementation tasks. "Though I can't blame you for accepting Global Financial's offer. It sounds like an excellent opportunity." "It is," I confirmed, "but I'll make sure everything here is properly handed over before I leave. I won't leave you hanging." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me, given the bug still lurking in the system. By Wednesday, the Global Financial integration was nearing completion. The parallel verification pathway was functioning perfectly, the test transactions were processing, without issues, and the final documentation was almost finished. All that remained was the ceremonial full implementation launch scheduled for Friday, my last day as a quantum contractor. But a new complication arose Thursday morning when Alex approached me with a troubled expression. "I think I found something concerning that security monitoring code," he said quietly. "I was reviewing the transaction logs from our latest test batch, and there's an anomaly in the timestamp verification for international transactions." My heart raced. "What kind of anomaly?" "A subtle latency increase in the verification process. Nothing major yet, but the pattern suggests it could grow over time." Alex pulled up the logs on his screen. See these response time variations? They correlate exactly with the conditional triggers in that security module. He was right. My bug was beginning to activate gradually, slightly earlier than I'd calculated. The first subtle effects were already appearing in the test environment. Could be a coincidence, I suggested, trying to sound casually analytical. Response time. Variations are common in complex systems, especially under changing load conditions. Alex wasn't convinced. Maybe, but the pattern is too consistent to be random. I think this security feature might actually be causing verification delays. If you're concerned, we could disable it temporarily, I offered, changing tactics. If the bug was already detectable, perhaps it was better to let Alex think he'd averted a problem rather than discover my deception. Better safe than sorry, for the launch tomorrow. That's what I was thinking, Alex agreed, looking relieved that I hadn't dismissed his concerns. I'll need your help, though. The code structure is complex, and I want to make sure we don't break any dependencies. For the next hour, I guided Alex through disabling what he thought was a security feature. In reality, I was helping him implement a temporary bypass that would mask the symptoms of my bug without actually removing it. The bypass would hold for about 2 weeks, long enough for me to be settled at Global Financial before the full effects became apparent. That should do it, I declared once we'd finished. The monitoring feature is now in passive mode. We can revisit it after the launch is stabilized. Alex ran another test batch, nodding with satisfaction when the response times returned to normal. Perfect. One less thing to worry about for tomorrow's launch. I felt a twinge of guilt at his relief, knowing the fix was merely temporary. But I consoled myself with the knowledge that the eventual disruption would be controlled, inconvenient enough to demonstrate Quantum's vulnerability, but not catastrophic enough to cause lasting damage. Friday arrived, my final day at Quantum. Dynamics. The global financial implementation launch was scheduled for 2 p.m., with executives from both companies in attendance. Marshall had arranged another elaborate ceremony, complete with press releases and marketing materials touting the revolutionary partnership. As Alex and I made final preparations that morning, Thomas Reeves stopped by our workspace. "Everything on track for the launch?" he asked, his attention focused primarily on me. "All systems go," I confirmed. "The integration has been thoroughly tested and documented." Thomas nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. And we're still on for your start date 2 weeks from Monday?" From the corner of my eye, I saw Marshall approaching, just in time to overhear Thomas's question. "Absolutely," I replied, making no effort to lower my voice. "I'm looking forward to joining the blockchain verification team." Marshall's steps faltered momentarily before he composed himself and continued toward us. "Thomas," he greeted with forced cordiality. "I see you're checking on the technical preparations. Alex has everything well in hand for this afternoon's ceremony." "Indeed," Thomas agreed. "Jake has been walking me through the final implementation details. The parallel verification architecture is particularly impressive. We're considering adopting a similar approach for other client integrations." Marshall's smile remained fixed as he processed the implications. "Well, we're certainly pleased that Quantum's innovations are making such a positive impression." "Innovations built on Jake's architecture," Thomas added pointedly, "which is precisely why we're excited to have him joining our team." The moment was sweetly satisfying. Marshall forced to stand there as his client openly praised the employee he'd discarded and was now poaching. The launch ceremony itself was unremarkable. Speeches, handshakes, photographs, and the ceremonial processing of the first official global financial transaction through the new system. Marshall took center stage naturally, while Alex and I handled the actual technical implementation from a workstation at the side of the room. As the event wound down, Melissa sought me out to say goodbye. "So this is really it," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Off to the competition." "Client, not competition," I corrected with a smile. "Either way, Marshall's going to have an aneurysm when he realizes what just happened," she chuckled. First, he forces you out, then you get hired by our biggest client, and now you know both systems inside and out. It's honestly poetic. She had no idea how poetic it would become in about 2 weeks when my bug fully activated. As the day came to a close, Alex walked me to the security desk where I would turn in my contractor badge for the final time. "It's been an education working with you," he said sincerely. "I know things started in an awkward situation, but I'm grateful for everything you've taught me." The genuine appreciation in his voice made my stomach twist with guilt. "You're going to do fine, Alex. You've got a solid grasp of the system now." "Thanks to you," he acknowledged. "And hey, since we'll be working with each other, you at Global Financial and me here, let's stay in touch. Maybe grab a beer sometime?" "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to realize I actually meant it. With a final handshake, I turned in my badge and walked out of quantum dynamics for the last time, 8 years and 1 month after I first arrived, leaving behind a very different legacy than I had initially planned. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation for my new role at Global Financial. I deliberately avoided checking in with Quantum, needing clean separation before the inevitable fallout from my bug. Then, 3 days before my official start date at Global Financial, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Alex's voice, tense and urgent. "Jake? Thank God you answered. We've got a serious problem with the international transaction system. Response times have suddenly spiked, and we're seeing authentication failures across multiple clients." My bug had activated, right on schedule. "That sounds serious," I replied, feigning surprise. "Have you identified the cause?" "Not yet," Alex admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "It seems to be related to that security module we disabled, but the bypass we implemented has somehow failed. Marshall is in full panic mode. Global financial transactions are still processing correctly through the parallel pathway, but everything else is degrading rapidly. What do you need from me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Can you come in? As a consultant? Marshall has authorized emergency rates, triple your previous contract. We need someone who understands the deepest layers of the verification system." It was exactly the scenario I'd anticipated. Quantum desperate for my expertise, willing to pay premium rates to fix a problem they couldn't solve without me. "I'll be there in an hour," I agreed, suppressing the satisfaction in my voice. When I arrived at Quantum's offices, the atmosphere was chaotic. Developers huddled around monitors, Marshall paced nervously in the conference room, and Alex looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," he said, relief washing over his face as he saw me. "The situation has gotten worse in the last hour. We're now seeing complete verification failures for about 20% of international transactions." I nodded gravely, following him to a workstation where he'd been analyzing the system logs. "Show me what you've found so far," I requested, settling into the familiar role of problem solver. For the next several hours, I guided Alex through a methodical investigation of the mysterious issue, careful to approach the bug as if discovering it for the first time. Together, we traced the symptoms to the international verification pathway, identified the conflicting code patterns, and gradually worked toward a solution. "There," I said finally, pointing to the exact module where my bug resided. "See this? Conditional trigger? It's incrementally extending the verification timeout parameters based on transaction volume. Over time, it's caused a cascade effect through the entire authentication process." Alex stared at the code, comprehension dawning. "This is deliberately designed to cause increasing delays until verification fails completely. This isn't a security feature, it's some kind of sabotage." I kept my expression neutral. "Looks that way. Question is, who implemented it and why?" "It had to be someone with deep system access and knowledge of the verification architecture," Alex reasoned, the Implications starting to sink in. Someone who understood exactly how to disrupt the system without triggering immediate alerts. Our eyes met, and I saw the moment of realization cross his face, followed immediately by doubt and uncertainty. He couldn't bring himself to voice the obvious conclusion. Whoever did it, I said carefully. They knew exactly how valuable specialized knowledge of these systems would be when things went wrong. I turned back to the screen. The good news is, now that we've identified the issue, I can fix it. It'll take a few hours to fully resolve, but we can implement a temporary patch immediately to stop the degradation. As I began coding the solution, Marshall appeared at our workstation, his face drawn with stress. "Have you found the problem?" he demanded. "Jake identified it," Alex confirmed. "It appears to be a deliberately placed code trigger designed to cause progressive system failures in the international verification pathway." Marshall's expression darkened. "Deliberately placed? Are you saying we were hacked?" "Not exactly," Alex replied, choosing his words carefully. "It would have required internal access and extensive system knowledge." Marshall's eyes darted to me momentarily, a flicker of suspicion quickly replaced by desperate relief that the problem was being solved. "How soon can you fix it?" he asked me. "The temporary patch will be ready in 20 minutes, I replied calmly. "Full resolution will take until tomorrow, but this will stop the immediate failures." "Do it," he ordered, then hesitated before adding, "And thank you for coming in. The company appreciates your expertise in this matter." The closest thing to gratitude I'd ever received from him. 6 hours later, the crisis was fully resolved. The international verification system was functioning normally again. Client complaints had been addressed with minimal reputational damage, and Marshall was busy crafting a narrative that characterized the incident as an identified security anomaly that was promptly addressed by our expert technical team. As I prepared to leave, Alex walked me to the elevator one final time. "I know it was you," he said quietly, once we were alone. "The bug. I recognized your coding style once I knew what to look for." I met his gaze steadily, neither confirming nor denying. "Funny thing is," he continued, "I can't entirely blame you. The way they treated you after 8 years of building their entire system, it was wrong." "Sometimes," I replied carefully, "people need to learn the value of what they had only after experiencing its absence." Alex nodded slowly. "The lesson wasn't lost on me. I've already started documenting everything properly, including all the shortcuts and optimizations you showed me. Next time there's a crisis, they won't need to call in emergency consultants." "Smart move," I acknowledged. "Though I suspect this won't be the last time Quantum needs specialized expertise they've discarded." "Probably not," Alex agreed. "Marshall already has his eye on the next cost-cutting initiative." He extended his hand. "Good luck at Global Financial. Their gain is definitely our loss." As I shook his hand, I felt a surprising sense of closure. My revenge had been executed, its point made clearly without causing lasting damage. Marshall had been forced to recognize my value, albeit grudgingly and temporarily. And now I was moving on to a company that seemed to genuinely appreciate technical expertise and institutional knowledge. The bug, my digital time bomb, had served its purpose. Now it was time to build something new, somewhere my contributions would be valued not just in crisis, but every day. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, but success on your own terms. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.